Welcome to Season 4 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking to other experts who help people to change careers, as well as a few ex-teachers who've forged a pathway into something new. So come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Episode 5. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. And on today's show, I'm very pleased to be interviewing Graham Wynn from Superior People Recruitment. Thanks for coming on the show today, Graham.
My pleasure.
So Graham, we were just chatting beforehand and you said you live actually in regional Victoria and yet you run this huge recruitment firm. Can you tell us a little bit about where your offices are and what what that looks like? What's a day in the life of?
Sure. Started the office originally about 12 or 13 years ago in Melbourne, then expanded into Sydney, Brisbane and Auckland as well. And probably about May of last year, I was laid up following ankle surgery, and so I was off my feet for 3 or 4 months. So basically, I had to work from home anyway, and it showed me that the business could run without me being in the office all the time. I'm much more of not a city person. I prefer regional. So I took the opportunity to move to Shepparton, regional Victoria, and open an office up in Shepparton as well now. So I run those offices now, and we have staff in each state that look after those offices, and it works quite effectively. Yes, I don't need to be there all the time. So COVID has shown me that, which is great.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Shepparton's not a very, well, I don't know, not compared to Melbourne. What's the population there?
There's about 50,000 people in Shepparton, but it's quite spread out because it is a lot of agricultural farming area. So lots of bigger blocks up here for sure. Yes, most definitely. It's more blue-collar workers than white-collar workers, definitely, but that's changing a lot with a lot of people now getting away from the city and wanting to move to regional Victoria or regional New South Wales. People are fed up with regular lockdowns and thinking, I don't want to be in the city anymore. I can work remotely. I can work from home. So it is changing the landscape quite a lot, definitely. But I love it up here. It's peaceful. It's quiet. It's 5 minutes into the city centre. Free parking on Saturdays when you go shopping. Love it.
So that background behind you is definitely not what's actually out the window.
Definitely not. It'd be nice though, wouldn't it?
It's a pretty good view, but I think the tree change is also a pretty nice way to go as well. So tell me, in Shepparton, are there do you do much recruiting and placing people in Shepparton?
That business is starting to pick up quite a bit. It was slow when I first came up here because of the COVID, because even though the regional wasn't locked down, there's such an impact when the city locks down on regional areas that people can't commute, can't travel, can't get supplies. So it was very quiet, but that is now starting to pick up in mainly the financial areas, accounting areas, legal areas, that kind of business. So we're doing some work with those at the moment, yes. We've done a bit of work retail-wise up in Shepparton as well, placing staff in retail outlets. So, yes, business is definitely picking up. It's a slow burner, but I expected that anyway.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so as you know, I work with teachers who want to get out of teaching and into a life they love, and a couple of things that they try to do maybe first is get a job in a different school, and then they say, okay, well, I tried that and that wasn't a very good plan. Or they might do relief teaching, which is what I did on my way out, and I worked in a few different schools and, had a day where I found myself yelling at a 5-year-old and just thought, okay, that turned out to be my last day. I just thought, I just don't want to be this person. I don't want to be in a situation that triggers that kind of response in me anymore. And so that turned out to be my last day. So I'm now completely out of it and deregistered and I can't go back. I thought if I did deregister, that would force my hand to not go back. And so I'm really pleased with that decision, but it meant then that, I was already working as a coach, so it was fine. I was just doing a bit of relief teaching on the side. But when someone does make that decision to leave, then they're in a position of, okay, now I need to look for something else, or I need to create my own business the way you have. Yep. But often people don't feel confident to start something of their own because they feel like they don't have experience in any other sector except for education. So what are the kinds of things they need to be thinking about if they're going to put themselves on the job market? So these are professionals, they've been intelligent, they've got a whole swathe of transferable skills, but they might feel like they have no options or that they couldn't possibly work in a different sector other than education. What would you say to them?
There are certainly challenges when you're moving from that educational sector into more what we class as the private sector, that the way people work is very, very different. And I think what they need to understand is that when you're moving from education into private sector, the structure of your day is very, very different. From a teaching point of view, you have a structure. You know when your classes are, you have structure. In the private sector, that structure is gone. It doesn't exist as much. In the large corporations, it does. But the small to medium business, no. Structure, yes, this is my main function, but you need to be far more flexible that things will change daily on a regular basis. And that's something they need to be aware of. So when they're looking for work elsewhere, they've got to think to themselves, okay, that kind of business, is it a kind of business where I will feel firstly comfortable with the fact that it's a business I can actually really get involved with and get passionate about? I think passion's a word that gets used a lot. I think if you find a business that you're passionate about, you can make it work. That's the first thing. The second thing is that their transferable skills are huge. Communication, people skills, and the fact they are very organised and have to follow processes. Those are things which lots of businesses do like. So it's about looking at businesses where clearly processes involved. You tend to find a very small business with, shall we say, less than 10 people. They do fly by the seat of their pants quite a bit. And so teachers moving into that kind of environment will struggle because there is no structure, there's no organisation, there's no procedures, there's no policies, there's very little documentation. So they need to aim for that business probably, I would say, somewhere between 20 and 100 people if possible, because that would be not too large for them, but also the right kind of business where there'll be some structure. But they're also relying more on the type of person they're employing, not necessarily their experience background-wise. And we're finding a lot more employers in that size of business look for people rather than experience. If you fit, if you've got the right attitude, the right work ethic, we can train you. That's what they're really looking for now. If it's a more technical kind of role, you must have experience. There's no ifs, buts, maybes. But to move into a generic admin, customer service, that kind of role, they're really looking for a culture fit, if you like, someone who fits with our environment. That's what they're after, because that can't be taught. So I think that the teachers need to look at, okay, how do I make my personality come across in an interview so that the person interviewing me realises I have a personality, a character that works with their environment. They can Google companies, do research, check out the people on LinkedIn who worked there, so they can get a feel for the kind of business just by doing research.
Okay.
And that helps a great deal before you get to that interview stage.
So you're talking about like maybe accounting firms, or like what are the kinds of businesses that are in that are that size, that are the kind of places where someone with an education background?
Look, there's a whole range of businesses. There's engineering companies, manufacturing companies, accounting, professional services. There's a lot in that area, but you don't need to be an engineer or work in manufacturing to work in those businesses, because quite often they'll have generic admin or reception or customer service or even order processing people who just really want someone with good people skills, good telephone skills, who can actually take information and deal with that information when they get it. So there's lots of options for them.
Yeah.
We've found quite a challenge also for people who come from, and we're using teaching as an example right now, is that when they move into the private sector, they need to also be aware the salaries may not be what they've been used to. And that happens for anybody going through a career change. The salaries may sometimes drop because you're not paid for what your experiences are. You're paid for what the job is. Now, 10 years ago, you could get extra money based on experience. Doesn't happen anymore. It's like, this is the job. Whether you're 20 years old, 40 years old, or 60 years old, that is the salary. And companies are moving more to that model of the salary is for the job, not what you bring to us. And I think they need to understand that the market has changed a lot on salaries. And when you go through a career change, you may have to take a bit of financial hits. And one example I think of, just pre-COVID, we were looking for a graduate accountant, basically, and the salary was $40,000, something like that. And we had somebody apply for it who'd been a sales manager for a national company, and he'd gone and retrained to be an accountant. Brilliant. But he was in his probably late 40s, early 50s. And he was sort of, well, I need $80,000 to $100,000 salary because that's what I'm used to and that's my lifestyle. But I said, but you're competing with 20-year-olds who'll take $40,000. So you've got to be aware that when you have this career change, you may take a financial hit, and there's no easy way around that one. It's just a fact of life there.
Yeah. So it's something to be aware of, isn't it? And I do always ask people when they're on their way out, do you have a buffer? Like, have you got a bit of savings? And do you have backup if something goes wrong, or you just don't walk into your next job straight away? Have you got someone else who's going to support you? And a lot of the teachers I talk to are single women in their 50s, and they don't have either of those things. And so it is really challenging to think about walking out of education and into something else when there might be, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 pay cut. It's a big, cut. Yeah.
It hurts a lot, yeah. And also, I think when they're applying for work, we tend to find people from that sort of professional background, their resumes can be very, very lengthy and wordy.
Okay.
And when you're applying for work, no. It has to be short, sharp, to the point, no weasel words, no fancy terminology. Make the assumption, this is not meant to be detrimental, make the assumption the person reading your resume knows nothing.
Yeah.
Make it really, really simple. Because if a person reading your resume doesn't understand it, they'll just move on to the next one. So we find a lot of people from that professional background make their resumes too wordy, too technical sometimes, and they use a lot of abbreviations as well. And if you're in the education sector, that's great. Everyone knows what that is. But if you're not in that sector, no one knows what it is. And if they're applying through recruitment agencies, generally those people have not worked in the teaching sector. So you need to make that resume really simple. That person reading it fully understands what it is you do and what you can bring to a job. So not just your experience in that job, but what practical experience you can bring, what people skills you can bring into it. Really make that obvious in a resume.
Right. Oh, that's great advice. So I when I'm talking to, my clients who are trying to get out of teaching, one thing I say to them, because in education, you talk about like what you're learning to do on a particular day, and then what's the context. So, I'm making a coil pot out of clay, which I was an art teacher. So making a coil pot. So I could say I'm learning to make a coil pot, but actually what I'm learning to do is rolling and joining techniques in the context of the coil pot. So I say to the teachers, using that example, because it's the best one I can think of, is what are the skills, like what's the equivalent of the joining technique? Because the context is the school, right? We already know that. What's the actual skill? So is it, telephone conversations with stakeholders, or, which could be the parents or other staff members or whoever, and then, writing emails that make sense and spelling, and I don't know. Tell me, what would you say for stuff, say communication skills? What would you write that would capture the attention of someone looking at a resume?
I think probably one thing would stand out straight away would be the ability to deal with conflict, the ability to deal with a wide range of different people from different backgrounds. They're really strong communication skills. So you want to highlight that, because you're not just dealing with the children, but it's the parents, it's your peers, it's stakeholders. So I think really highlight, you are dealing with a very, very wide range of people. You're not just teaching 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds. There's far more to it than that. Yeah. So I think that really needs to be highlighted. And there'll be conflict all the time coming up in that job. I'm quite sure about that. Yeah. To really highlight those areas as well. I think, unfortunately, people can undersell themselves quite a lot and not realise what they're capable of doing. And we see that quite often. You've really got to look at, what do I do? And as you say, extract that further out. You're not just talking to school children. You're talking to a wide range of people. So highlight that in your resume and really put that in. And if you've been involved with any committees, work groups, organised events, functions, highlight that as well, because that's a skill. Yeah. Not everybody can do that. So highlight those areas as well. Don't just say, I was a teacher. It doesn't say anything.
Yeah. And especially if you're not in the sector and you've had an experience as a student yourself, you know, if you're, say you're the hiring manager, you've been a kid in a school and you know what it's like to be a kid in a school, but you don't realise all the behind-the-scenes stuffs that go towards making that experience what it was, that there's all this paperwork and, you know, testing and data collection and a whole lot of other stuff that happens that the student doesn't realise, and then they grow up to be an adult and they think they know what a teacher does. They only see one facet of that. So, yeah, that's great advice.
Recruitment agencies, and there are a lot of us around, something like over 85% are people under 26 who work in recruitment agencies. They don't have a lot of practical work experience. So they really are square peg, round hole quite often. So they'll get a vacancy from a client and they've used like a tick box system. And when your resume comes in, does that tick off enough boxes? And if it doesn't, then they won't look at you. So when you're applying for a job, look really closely at the criteria, what people are looking for, and make sure you put that in your resume. And part of the reason for that is a lot of the larger agencies use an automated system now. They don't even look at resumes. So they've got a database. You apply, I'll use Seek as an example. You apply for a Seek. That resume automatically goes into their database. And if there's enough keywords in your resume that match the job vacancy, it spits it out the other end, and then they look at it.
Right.
So you can't have one resume for every job. You've got to really look. And what you'll find, we'll use Seek because it's the largest job board, obviously. You'll find they use keywords more than once normally in a job ad. And so those keywords are the ones they really focus on. So when you're applying for it, look for those keywords and make sure you put them either in your cover letter or your resume. Otherwise, the consultant doesn't even see your resume.
Right. So you're saying that because it's going to run through a computer and say there's a keyword like communication, would that be a keyword?
Absolutely right.
Okay.
So whatever keyword you see in that job ad, make sure you put them in your resume. Right. Because that's what this system uses. It looks for matching keywords. And if they're not there, then no one even sees your resume. And that's been a change in the recruitment industry over the last few years, a lot going to this automated system. And a lot of job seekers aren't aware of that's what happens.
Yeah.
Smaller agencies, I mean, ourselves, we look at every resume that comes in. My thought process is, you may have applied for this job, which you may not be suited to, but I've got this job you might be suited to. So that's the mindset we have. It's a longer process. It takes more time. The big agencies, though, they want to just get them through as quickly as possible. So they use AI to really work out, does this resume match the job? And if not, no one looks at it. And so that's a real risk with the way that automated system works. We call it lazy recruitment because you're relying on a computer to tell you somebody the criteria. So if that's what's happening, you're applying through job boards, really look at keywords and make sure you put those in your resume. Otherwise, no one sees it. And with regards to resume, there's certain things that some people leave information off resumes because they're scared of being discriminated against. It actually goes the other way around. If you leave information off, people discriminate against you, because I use the word discrimination lightly. It's more about, if I don't know certain things, I don't have time to ring up and ask you to fill in the blanks. So by leaving information off your resume, actually is detrimental to your chances of getting a job. And the information I'm talking about is a suburb where you live. Put it on. I mean, for instance, if in Melbourne, we use Melbourne example, if you're applying for a job in say, Werribee, way out western suburbs, and you live in Frankston, not going to happen. Yeah. But if you don't put on where you live, again, the automated system won't find your resume because they will put in, find me somebody in Werribee or within 20 kilometres. Won't find you. So leaving that suburb, don't need a full address, but a suburb's really important. Yeah. And the other thing people leave off, if there's large gaps in your resume, and the genuine reasons for large gaps, you could have been having family, overseas holiday, caring for somebody, whatever, put on why there's a large gap.
Yeah.
there's a genuine reason, put it on, because otherwise, and this was the example given to me once by an employer, he said, they've got a 2-year gap. They could have been in prison for all we know.
Yeah.
That was,
yeah.
he said, not that that's always a problem, but if we don't know, we can't afford to guess.
Yes.
So put as much information as possible. And the other one that's important is dates. Somebody will put on a resume, I was at this place from 2019 to 2020. Now, that could be 2 weeks or 2 years.
Yeah.
Put proper dates, January 2019 to April 2020. People doing the review of your resume can get a much clearer picture of stability, how much work you did there, how long you were there for. It matters. Those little things like that really, really matter. So by people leaving information off, it actually works against them. Put as much information on as possible. Then if you still get an interview, everything's above board. There's nothing hidden.
Yeah.
You know that the employer is still happy with what you've said.
Yeah, true. And I guess I want to ask about age. I stopped putting my age on my resume, but they could still see when I did my first degree. Which
correct. If we've got a brain, we can work out roughly how old you are.
Yeah. So and it wasn't
every recruiter and every employer checks out social media as well as a point of referral and referencing. Yeah. So we'll always go and check out your LinkedIn profiles, your Facebook profiles. Every recruiter, every employer does it. So we can get a clearer picture, because quite often on your Facebook page, if you have one, you put a year you were born, or you'll see pictures of you holding your child who is 18 years old. Okay, she's not 20. We can work it out.
Or your grandchild.
Yeah, or your grandchildren, exactly right. So we can generally, if we've got a brain, we can work out rough age-wise. Yeah. And age is an interesting thing. And I hate to use the word discrimination because it brings up too many bad meanings. But basically, the way ageism works, it's not about the number. It doesn't matter how old you are. It's about experience. And I've got one client, for instance, who has got an open plan office with about 6 people in there, all females, all over 40. And he says, I don't want a 20-year-old in here. It just won't work. Vice versa, I've got a plan office of people all under 25, putting a 50-year-old in there, it just doesn't work. And the other issue on age is that some employers think the more mature you are, the slower you are at picking up new computer skills. That's the real challenge. So the age is not because you're older, it's what comes with that. And in teaching, the perception would be you're not using a lot of computers generally in your day-to-day work. So people would think, therefore, how up-to-date are your computer skills?
Oh, really? Okay, so that's really not true, especially not now.
It's about perception.
Yeah.
I would, therefore, back to resume and skill set, if you're in the education sector and applying for work, really highlight computers and technology you're experienced in, skilled in, or used to using, because a lot of people perceive from that area you don't use computers all the time.
Yeah.
So there's a real perception about that. And I think people in banks, there's a very similar perception. They only use the banking computer system, nothing else.
Right.
So that computer knowledge is non-transferable. So I think you really highlight computer and technology you're using, because the perception is they don't use them very much.
Right, yeah. Which especially now with COVID the world's opened up because of technology. So teachers have had to adapt really quickly.
Yep. And so I would certainly highlight computer skills and technology, definitely.
Yeah, great. Okay. And what other things do you think, like, with your kind of general knowledge about what a teacher does, what do you think are other skills that they need to be considering to highlight?
I say organisation, definitely.
Yep.
I would think probably diligence would be something else they're very strong at, because of marking paperwork, etc., making sure the plans are done right. So I think that's something else to really highlight as well. Their communication skills, they're dealing with conflict skills for sure. And I think also there is that element of, yes, you're, again, perception-wise, the working day is not as long as normal people's working day. There is that perception. So I think highlighting the fact you do things outside of the standard work or school hours, highlight that as well, so people know you're used to working beyond 5 o'clock, or you're used to doing stuff before 9 o'clock. Really highlight that as well, because, again, perception-wise, people think teachers only work 9 till 3:30 or something like that. So, again, it's about beating that perception And perception is something that's very hard to deal with unless you really highlight it and emphasize the point. This is what I do. This is what I do outside of school hours as well. Really highlight those areas so people know you're not locked into just a school day.
Yeah, got it. Okay. That's really helpful. Actually, I wouldn't have even thought about that. I went out to dinner last night with some of my ex-teacher buddies because one of them's just retired, and one of them was saying she's got a 7:15 a.m. meeting, then she's got her day, then there's an after-school meeting as well. So she's working from 7:15 till around 4:30 on that particular day of the week. And then she's still got her other preparation and planning for the following day. Her lunch breaks are taken up with yard duty. So she's got this horrendous day. I said, that sounds like a great day to chuck a sickie.
Yeah.
But she said, no, I don't want to do that because then I'll be so far behind, it'll make it even more stressful. So, yeah, it's pretty challenging.
But it comes down to perception and how people perceive the teaching industry. And one example I'll use right now, my background, it looks wonderful. And people see that background and think, oh, what a magnificent office you've got. It's a virtual background.
Yeah.
My background behind me is walls and what have you. But perception-wise, what a difference it makes.
Yeah.
And that perception is what people have, whether we like it or not. We all form judgments. We all form opinions. We all have perceptions, and you need to somehow get around those. And so, therefore, the more you can highlight that you do, which is beyond what people perceive your job to be, the better.
That's great advice. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap this up, Graham?
Look, one thing I would say also, if you see a job advert that says cover letter, make sure you do one.
Right.
A lot of companies use that, please send in a cover letter, as a bit of a pre-screening tool, because a lot of people just send resumes off just willy-nilly. If it says put a cover letter, do it. It may not have much in there, but at least the recruiter knows you've taken 5 minutes to read and put a cover letter in there. Also be very conscious of what's worded in, as we've found some employers getting quite sneaky recently. What they're doing, they're putting in a question in the job ad, something which can be completely irrelevant. Please tell us your favourite colour. And so basically that says you've read the ad clearly and you've responded to it. No. And that's part of the issue around a lot of the unemployed people now have to apply for so many job vacancies, and they just send their resumes off just for the hell of it, basically, just to get there. And we'll get the same unemployed person sending 20 resumes for 20 different jobs, none they're suited to, but they can tick the box and get their benefits. So a lot of recruiters and employers now are putting these little questions in the job ad just to make sure, okay, you've definitely read it and you've replied to it, and therefore it's a genuine application. So really,
a way of filtering out the genuine applicants.
Absolutely, yes.
The ones that want the job.
Because we can get 200 to 400 resumes for any particular job quite easily. Oh, wow. So if you find a way of actually filtering some of those out, we will do that. So really make sure if you read the ad and there's a question in there, or even in the job ad, they sometimes will put criteria. Make sure you cover that criteria in your cover letter. A cover letter is not just simply, I'm interested in this job. The cover letter should address criteria.
Yeah.
The resume is your skills and experience. Your cover letter should address criteria, which means you've again read the job ad properly and it's a genuine application.
So if there were, say, 5 criteria, how long would you give to each one?
Look, in your cover letter, I would give 2 or 3 lines to each one. Your cover letter should never be more than 1 page.
Right.
And your resume should be never more than 3 or 4 pages maximum, no more than that.
Right.
We will get a resume. Front page says resume. Second page says person's name and address. Third page says whether it's specific. And you just go on and on. So really keep it short and sharp. Basic things, check spellings. Really big, because we will ignore resumes generally with bad spelling because there's no excuse. With Google, and you shouldn't make spelling mistakes on resumes. And the other risk that people make a lot of mistakes is I will get a cover letter, which is a template, and it will say, Dear Mary. No, I'm not called Mary. So if you're using templates, make sure you change the templates before you send it off for a job. Because as soon as I get a Dear Mary cover letter, delete.
Yeah.
If you can't get that right.
Yeah. And should people call, if there's a contact person for a particular job, is it wise to call the person beforehand and have a chat about the position? Or
if there's a phone number, yes. If there's no phone number, no.
Right, okay.
Because if there's a phone number, then clearly that's fine. If no phone number, no. Then you'll have to apply through the normal system. Recruiters, employers otherwise get bombarded with phone calls and they'll just move on. They don't want that.
Okay.
If you have a first interview, follow-up phone call, always fine. No problem at all with that. But certainly if there's no phone number on a job ad, don't ring. A lot of people will try that. They'll jump onto LinkedIn or jump onto the company's website and try and get contact numbers. You won't get past that first base. If there's no contact number, they do not want you to call, so don't.
Got it. All right. Excellent advice. Thank you. And Graham, just before we wind this up, I just want to ask you, what's your favourite song and why?
Okay, the song is a song called Music by an artist called John Miles. I think it was in the mid to late 1970s. It's quite a big production number. It builds up and builds up. And I find that relates quite well to business, that I started from nothing. I had to build layers and layers and layers. So I identified that. But music is a real passion of mine. I've got music playing all the time from a wide range of musics. And this particular song talks about music is my first love. It will be my last love. And that probably sums me up. Music is what I love.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And Graham, thank you very much for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today.
You're very welcome.
You've been listening to the Get Out of Teaching podcast, presented by Larksong Enterprises, with your host, Elizabeth Diakos. Do you know someone else who could benefit from hearing more stories of hope and transition from teachers all around the world? Please take a moment to share this and other episodes via your podcast app. Each share helps me reach listeners just like you who can benefit from this content. The Get Out of Teaching podcast is proud to be part of the Experts on Air podcast network. For show notes and other resources, please visit larksong.com.au/podcast.